Her words shattered the silence, and nothing would ever be the same. The first time our eyes truly met, it wasn't just a glance. It felt like time itself had paused. The cafe was quiet that late afternoon, sunlight streaming through the wide windows, painting golden streaks across the wooden tables. I noticed her immediately. A 40-year-old American woman with long black hair cascading gently over her shoulders, lightly tanned skin, and a presence that seemed to command space without demanding it. Her dark brown eyes carried a depth that hinted at unspoken stories, framed by soft laugh lines that suggested warmth beneath the quiet confidence. She sat alone, her posture relaxed yet elegant, fingers tracing the rim of her coffee cup, lost in thought. There was a subtle tension in the air as our paths crossed. I was 23, fresh from college, and perhaps overly aware of the difference in our worlds. Her beauty wasn't just physical. It radiated a sense of lived experience, a grace earned over decades, quietly magnetic. I found myself drawn to the small details. The curve of her smile, the gentle tilt of her head as she glanced up, the way sunlight caught the glint in her eyes. We exchanged the briefest of smiles, nothing spoken, yet an unspoken acknowledgement passed between us. It wasn't flirtation, not yet. It was recognition, a hint that two very different lives had brushed against each other with unexpected resonance. I noticed my heartbeat quicken, and even the subtle tension in my shoulders mirrored hers, though she seemed almost unaware of it. I took a seat nearby, pretending to read a book, but I couldn't help stealing glances. Her movements were slow, deliberate, yet fluid, each gesture graceful without being performative. There was a quiet vulnerability in the way she sipped her coffee, the faint exhale she released as if carrying the weight of private thoughts, the kind only years of life could accumulate. My curiosity wasn't superficial. It was pulled by something deeper, a feeling that here was someone who had stories worth hearing, emotions worth sharing. The cafe's soft hum, the clinking of cups, and distant chatter faded into the background as my mind fixated on her. Her fingers brushed her hair back, and for a fleeting moment, our eyes locked again. That brief connection was electric yet fragile, like a spark hovering over dry kindling, waiting for the right moment to ignite. I felt an urge to speak, to cross that invisible line between strangers, but something held me back, a mix of hesitation, respect, and the subtle gravity of the age gap that separated our worlds. By the time she left, there was an unmistakable shift in the air, as if the space itself had acknowledged the quiet pull between us. Her presence lingered long after she was gone, her scent faint but somehow etched into memory, a warmth I couldn't quite place. That day, nothing happened overtly, yet everything changed. The story didn't start with words. It started with the silence between us, the weight of unspoken recognition, and the slow, undeniable pull that neither of us could ignore. From that moment, every interaction became layered with anticipation, a delicate dance of observation and restraint. The first spark had been lit, quiet yet insistent, and I knew instinctively that whatever this was, it would not fade quickly. It demanded attention, patience, and an honesty neither of us was fully ready to confront. Yet the tension promised something profound, something that would grow far beyond a fleeting connection. The days after that first encounter, her presence lingered in my mind like a persistent melody I couldn't shake. It wasn't just her beauty, it was the subtle ways she carried herself, the quiet confidence mixed with an approachable warmth that made her unforgettable. Every detail came back vividly. The gentle sway of her long black hair, the faint freckles across her lightly tanned cheeks, the soft laugh lines at the corners of her eyes, and the way her curvy figure moved with effortless grace. She was 40, an American woman with the poise of someone who had lived fully and embraced life's complexities. Yet there was a vulnerability that made her human, approachable, and profoundly intriguing. I saw her again at a small bookstore a few days later. She stood by the window, sunlight illuminating her face, her dark brown eyes scanning the pages of a novel. She wore a simple yet elegant outfit, a cream blouse tucked into high-waisted jeans, her posture both confident and relaxed. I lingered near the shelves, pretending to examine books, but my attention was entirely on her. She didn't notice me at first, yet there was an invisible thread connecting us, a silent acknowledgement that our worlds had collided once more. When our eyes met this time, it wasn't fleeting. She held my gaze for a moment longer, and I felt the quiet intensity of her awareness. There was curiosity, yes, but also something deeper, an almost imperceptible hesitation, like she was weighing the consequences of letting herself feel. My own emotions mirrored hers, a mix of fascination, admiration, and a cautious longing. It wasn't a rush of passion, but a slow, simmering pull that demanded patience and attention. I noticed the little things that made her real. The faint crease in her forehead as she concentrated on a paragraph, the small smile that curved her lips as she read something amusing, the way her hands moved with subtle elegance. Each movement was a whisper of her personality, an invitation to understand her better. I wanted to reach out, to say something that might bridge the distance, yet respect held me back. The age difference was a silent weight in the room, but it also made the connection feel delicate, precious, and worth the careful approach. The interaction was brief. Just a shared smile, a nod, and the soft brushing of hands as I handed her a book she had accidentally dropped. Yet it carried the weight of unspoken words. Her touch was light but electric, a fleeting contact that left an echo in my chest, the kind that made ordinary moments feel charged. The bookstore, with its warm light and quiet corners, became a backdrop for something quietly significant. By the time she left, I realized that this wasn't a casual acquaintance or a passing attraction. There was a mutual recognition of a shared tension, a subtle desire to explore the connection without rushing it. The slow burn between us had begun, not in words, but in gestures, glances, and the lingering awareness of each other's presence. Each moment became a lesson in patience, each encounter a quiet reinforcement that some connections defy logic and demand emotional courage. That day, the ordinary act of standing near each other in a bookstore became a profound acknowledgement. Two lives, separated by years but drawn together by an undeniable, slowly growing bond. And in that silence, with the sun casting warm light across her face, I understood that this story was only just beginning. The tension between us grew quietly, almost imperceptibly, but it was there in every glance and every fleeting moment we shared. By now, the familiarity of her presence had begun to feel like a soft rhythm in my day, subtle, yet impossible to ignore. She was 40, an American woman with long black hair, lightly tanned skin, and a curvy figure that moved with natural elegance. Her dark brown eyes held an unmistakable intelligence, a mix of playfulness and guarded vulnerability that made each interaction feel significant. Every time she smiled, the faint laugh lines at the corners of her eyes deepened, giving her a warmth that drew me in without effort. That afternoon, we met at a small cafe tucked into a quiet street, sunlight pouring through the large windows, illuminating the steam rising from the mugs of coffee in front of us. She wore a soft, sky-blue blouse paired with tailored white trousers, her posture relaxed but graceful. The faint scent of her perfume, something soft floral, yet distinctly mature, lingered in the air, creating an invisible boundary that I wanted to cross but felt hesitant to. Our conversation began lightly, touching on books, music, and the mundane details of the day. Yet beneath the surface, there was an undercurrent of something more profound. Every pause, every glance, every subtle tilt of her head spoke louder than words. When her fingers brushed mine while reaching for the sugar, the contact was brief, almost accidental, but it sent a ripple of warmth through me. It wasn't just a touch, it was a connection that seemed to linger in the air, inviting more while demanding patience. I noticed the careful way she moved, the slight hesitation before she laughed, the way she tucked a strand of her long black hair behind her ear. These little gestures, so human and intimate, conveyed layers of emotion, curiosity, caution, and perhaps a silent hope that we both felt but dared not voice. I found myself leaning in slightly, attuned to the rhythm of her breathing, the cadence of her words, and the subtle shifts in her expression. At one point, our conversation turned to personal memories, childhood, past regrets, and quiet triumphs. Her eyes softened as she spoke, and for a moment, the world outside the cafe seemed to disappear. I felt the gravity of her experience, the weight of her life, and the allure of someone who had known both joy and hardship. It was not just attraction, it was a profound respect for her depth, the sense that she had lived fully, yet allowed herself a moment of vulnerability with me. Time passed unnoticed. The cafe filled with light, laughter, and the hum of quiet conversations around us, but in our small corner, the world had narrowed to just the two of us. When it was time to leave, our hands brushed again, slightly longer this time, and I caught a flicker of something unspoken in her gaze. A question, a challenge, a hope. Walking away, I realized that this slow, measured intimacy was becoming impossible to ignore. The connection was growing, quiet but undeniable, and each shared moment only intensified the anticipation of what might come next. The fire in her eyes was subtle, controlled, yet impossible to deny, and I knew that the journey between us was just beginning, a slow burn that promised both tension and profound emotional resonance. The days that followed carried a quiet electricity, a tension that seemed to hang in the air whenever we were near each other. She was always calm, composed, and graceful, yet there was an undercurrent of emotion that I could feel even in the smallest gestures. At 40, she carried a presence that was both grounding and magnetic, an American woman with long black hair, lightly tanned skin, and dark brown eyes that held wisdom, curiosity, and a hint of mischief. Her figure was curvy but elegant, and the slight smile lines at the corners of her eyes made her warmth undeniable. Every interaction with her felt like standing at the edge of something both thrilling and delicate. That evening, we found ourselves in a quiet park, the sun hanging low in the sky, casting a golden glow over the benches and the neatly trimmed grass. She wore a cream-colored cardigan over a soft floral dress, her posture relaxed but undeniably graceful, and I noticed the gentle sway of her hair as she walked. The breeze carried the scent of fresh flowers, mixing subtly with the faint perfume she always wore, creating an intimate atmosphere even in the open space. We walked slowly, side by side, our conversation light at first, drifting from movies to shared childhood memories. Yet beneath every word was the silent tension of unspoken feelings. Every so often, our hands would almost touch, brushing accidentally, lingering for a heartbeat, and then retreating, leaving a subtle warmth that neither of us acknowledged openly. Her eyes, however, betrayed the quiet intensity she was trying to hide. There was a fire there, a longing that mirrored the hesitation in my own chest. At one point, we stopped by a small fountain, the water glistening in the evening light. She leaned slightly closer, her hand resting near mine on the stone edge, and for a moment, the world seemed to shrink until it was only the two of us. Her gaze met mine, searching, almost challenging, yet soft with vulnerability. I wanted to reach out to close the gap, but restraint held me back. This slow-burning connection was delicate, and every movement mattered. Her laughter broke the quiet moment, light and musical, carrying with it the warmth of someone who was beginning to trust me with her vulnerability. I noticed the way her shoulders relaxed as she spoke, the subtle tilt of her head when she smiled, the way her fingers twitched as if she longed to reach out but was unsure. Each gesture was a language of its own, a silent conversation we were having without words. As twilight deepened, casting a soft glow over the park, I realized that this tension, the hesitation, the subtle touches, the lingering looks, was building towards something inevitable. Our bond was no longer just friendly familiarity. It was a slow, deliberate dance of emotions, a careful exploration of desire and connection. Every glance, every accidental brush of hands, every shared laugh brought us closer to a truth neither of us wanted to rush, yet both of us were aching to confront. By the time we parted, the fire in her eyes had grown impossible to ignore. There was a silent promise there, a question hanging between us. How far could we allow this to go without breaking the fragile boundaries we were both painfully aware of? That evening, as I walked away, I knew that the moments ahead would test patience, courage, and the undeniable pull of something neither of us could deny. The days after that evening in the park were charged with an unspoken intensity. Every encounter felt like walking on the edge of a precipice, the air thick with anticipation. The 40-year-old American woman, confident, graceful, and quietly vulnerable, had a way of making ordinary moments feel extraordinary. Her long black hair caught the sunlight, cascading down her shoulders, and her dark brown eyes seemed to hold unspoken questions, daring me to answer them without words. Her lightly tanned skin and subtle freckles caught my attention each time our hands nearly brushed, and the soft laugh lines around her eyes only made her warmth more palpable. It was a bright Saturday morning when we met again at her favorite cafe, a quaint spot with wide windows letting in golden light. She wore a flowing navy dress with delicate embroidery, paired with a light cardigan that framed her figure elegantly. The way she moved, graceful, self-assured, yet approachable, made the space feel intimate, even though we were surrounded by other patrons. I couldn't help but notice the subtle ways she communicated her emotions. The tilt of her head, the gentle smile that didn't quite reach her eyes at first, the way her fingers traced the rim of her coffee cup. Conversation flowed naturally, but beneath the surface, the tension simmered. Every laugh, every shared memory, every accidental touch felt loaded with meaning. At one point, our hands brushed on the table, a fleeting contact that left a warmth spreading through my chest. She looked up at me, her dark eyes soft but intense, and there was a pause, a moment suspended in time, before she smiled, slightly teasing yet vulnerable. That smile spoke volumes. Desire held in check, feelings confessed silently, emotions dancing between restraint and surrender. We left the cafe and walked along the nearby riverbank, sunlight bouncing off the water, creating sparkling reflections that mirrored the fluttering in my chest. She matched my pace, sometimes a step ahead, sometimes beside me, her presence a comforting yet electrifying force. Every gesture was deliberate yet natural. The way she tucked her hair behind her ear, the casual brush of her hand against my arm, the way her gaze lingered a little longer than necessary. Each moment deepened the connection, building a bridge between curiosity and longing, hesitation and surrender. As we paused on a small wooden bridge overlooking the river, the conversation shifted to personal dreams and fears. Her voice, soft yet resolute, revealed glimpses of her vulnerability, moments where the confident exterior faltered just enough for me to see the depth of her humanity. My hand hovered near hers, a subtle invitation, and she didn't move away. Instead, she let our fingers graze lightly, the touch sending a shiver through both of us. There was a careful balance here. Affection without crossing boundaries, intimacy without words, desire simmering under the surface. By the time the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting a warm glow across the river, it was clear that neither of us could deny the pull between us any longer. Each lingering glance, each quiet smile, each gentle touch carried the weight of emotions we were only beginning to confront. And in that delicate, suspended space, it became undeniable. Something was changing, something real and irrevocable, and we were both teetering on the edge of surrender, unsure who would make the first move. The days following our riverbank encounter were quiet yet suffused with anticipation. Each message, each accidental glance, each fleeting interaction carried weight that neither of us could ignore. The 40-year-old American woman, confident, graceful, and quietly vulnerable, exuded a magnetic presence that made it impossible to separate ordinary moments from the extraordinary. Her long black hair framed her face perfectly, catching the sunlight just enough to highlight the subtle freckles and soft laugh lines that made her warmth so tangible. She wore a fitted, cream-colored blouse and tailored jeans, the ensemble simple but elegant, mirroring the balance between her strength and vulnerability. Every time her hand brushed mine, a quiet shiver ran through me, the sensation more profound than anything I had expected. We met that afternoon in her sunlit living room, a space filled with plants and warm wooden tones, sunlight pouring through the large windows and casting playful shadows on the floor. She poured tea with deliberate care, her movements slow and fluid, each gesture almost intimate in its precision. I watched the curve of her hands, the subtle arch of her back as she leaned forward, the glimmer in her dark brown eyes that hinted at emotions she hadn't yet spoken aloud. There was a quiet vulnerability beneath her confident demeanor, a truth she revealed only through the small, lingering touches. The hand resting lightly near mine, the brush of her shoulder as she reached for a cup, the way her gaze lingered on me even when her voice sounded casual. Conversation flowed like a gentle river, soft and unhurried, but the tension beneath it pulsed with every heartbeat. She laughed, a warm, melodic sound, yet there was an edge of something unspoken, a secret kept at bay. When our hands met over the table to reach for the same teacup, we paused, fingertips grazing, a silent acknowledgement of the pull neither of us could deny. The air felt thick with unspoken questions, each glance a whisper of longing. I felt the magnetic force of her presence, her mature beauty not just in her appearance, but in the confident, graceful aura she carried, in the vulnerability she allowed herself to show in these quiet moments. We moved to the sofa, sitting close enough that our knees almost touched, yet careful enough to maintain a deliberate restraint. The sunlight framed her figure, accentuating her lightly tanned skin and curvy, graceful posture. Her head tilted slightly as she spoke about her past, her tone soft but deliberate, and I leaned in, drawn by the intimacy of her voice and the honesty in her words. The conversation skirted the edges of deeper truths, and I felt the tension of emotions rising, the delicate dance of desire and hesitation. As the afternoon waned, our hands found each other again, this time resting deliberately, lingering longer than necessary. The warmth of her touch contrasted with the coolness of the light streaming through the windows, an electric sensation that both comforted and ignited. Each smile, each fleeting glance, each careful movement created a rhythm of closeness, intimacy, and unspoken longing. There was no need for words. The quiet space between us spoke volumes. In that suspended, sunlit room, it became clear that the line between friendship and something more had blurred irrevocably. And yet the question lingered. Who would acknowledge it first, and what would happen when the truth could no longer remain unspoken? The final chapter of our slow-burning connection unfolded with a quiet intensity, a culmination of weeks of lingering glances, hesitant touches, and unspoken longing. The 40-year-old American woman sat across from me at the small cafe table, sunlight streaming through the windows, highlighting the soft laugh lines at the corners of her eyes and the gentle curve of her shoulders beneath the tailored, sapphire blue blouse she wore. Her long black hair cascaded gracefully down her back, catching the light, a frame for the depth and warmth in her dark brown eyes. Every detail spoke of her confident, graceful presence, yet there was a vulnerability in her posture, a subtle hesitance in the way she moved, that drew me closer. The atmosphere was thick with anticipation. Our conversation started lightly, about books and music, yet beneath the surface, each word carried weight. The pauses between sentences were not empty. They were charged with the emotions we had been suppressing. Her hand, resting lightly on the edge of the table, trembled just enough for me to notice, a small but intimate signal of her inner conflict. When our fingers brushed while reaching for the same coffee cup, it was electric, a silent acknowledgement of the bond that had been building between us. I felt the warmth of her touch linger far longer than necessary, and it was as if time had slowed, leaving only the two of us suspended in a delicate, unspoken dance. Finally, she leaned forward, her gaze unwavering, her voice soft but resolute. "I can't keep pretending I don't feel this," she confessed, the words carrying a weight that both terrified and thrilled me. The honesty in her tone mirrored the tumult I had felt in my own chest, the pull between desire and hesitation, the fear of consequences versus the longing that had been impossible to ignore. My heart raced as I reached for her hand, our fingers intertwining naturally, a perfect fit, and for the first time, the emotional distance that had lingered between us dissolved completely. We sat in that sunlit cafe, hands clasped, knees brushing lightly beneath the table, each movement deliberate yet instinctive. Her subtle smiles, the slight tilt of her head, the warmth radiating from her touch, all spoke of a connection deeper than words. I could feel the steadiness of her heartbeat against my palm, the quiet strength and grace that defined her presence, and the vulnerability she allowed herself in this moment made the intimacy even more profound. There was laughter, soft and melodic, mingling with the occasional pause, as we navigated this newfound closeness with care and respect. As the afternoon light shifted, painting the room in golden hues, I realized that what we had was more than fleeting attraction. It was understanding, trust, and a bond forged through shared vulnerability and quiet moments of connection. The tension, once a tightrope we dared not cross, had transformed into something tender, reassuring, and alive. Each look, each smile, each lingering touch confirmed that the age difference mattered little compared to the emotional resonance we shared. By the time we stood to leave, hands still lightly entwined, the world outside seemed distant, unimportant. We walked slowly, savoring the warmth of proximity, the unspoken promise of what was to come. There was no rush, no need for grand declarations. The intimacy of shared understanding was enough. And as we stepped into the sunlight together, the story of two hearts, separated by years but united in quiet longing, reached its tender, satisfying conclusion. It was a love built on patience, depth, and unwavering honesty, a connection that would endure long after the moment had passed.